welcome to episode 47 of the Comic Watchers Show. The Comic Watchers Show is brought to you by ComicWatch.com. I am your host, Matt Meyer, coming to you from glamorous Oklahoma City. With me, as always, are the other Comic Watchers.
It's me, John Jack.
And me, Nicholas, from Carthage, Texas.
And me from Portland, Oregon.
Well, you might have noticed that we are missing one of our faithful, loyal Comic Watcher voices this week. Mr. Cody White has graciously stepped aside as host, and I have donned the crown, I guess, is the best way to put it. Or it was voted on by the majority, because this is a democracy after all. America. But that's not necessarily a bad thing indeed, because Cody is coming to us soon with a brand new show called Cody Aloysius White Talks About Comics and Narrative Flow. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be pretty much whenever he wants to do it on his wacky Hawaii time. So I cannot wait, and I know the rest of the guys can't either. So Cody, we love you. We can't wait for your show. And we're just going to keep trucking right along, though. Brian, what do you have for us this week on news?
Yeah, so Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker is set to release December 20th of this year. This wouldn't be so newsworthy information. However, they're still doing reshoots as we speak. So it kind of makes you wonder how this movie is going to turn out. Is it going to be better than the last two or three? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Someone is getting a new code name, but are they really? Batman has a tendency of collecting Robins, while one Robin is setting off on his own with a new code name. That's right, ladies and gentlemen.
That lucky duck him.
Tim Drake will no longer be called Red Robin. He will just be going by Drake. This was, of course, revealed in Young Justice number 8. I know several of us.
Bird in the world.
What was it?
The most dangerous bird in the world.
Yeah, well, you know. I know some of us are super excited about the new Valiant news about Hairbringer getting its own movie. But
Harbinger.
Huh?
Harbinger.
Oh, what did I say? Hairbringer?
Yeah.
I think I like Hairbringer better.
Yeah.
And I'm going to taunt Ken endlessly with that.
Hairbringer.
Now I'm going to always say just Hairbringer because that's just whatever. Okay, but I don't want to say too much about it. We'll probably talk more about it on our new show, Valiant Watch. And guys, who loved the 90s Marvel shows? Raise your hand. Like the animated series? I definitely did. Yeah, so we're gonna get that on, or if you like the X-Men animated and Spider-Man plus several more, you're gonna see it on Disney Plus when it launches, which is coming apparently really soon. It also mentioned that all of Marvel movies will be on Disney Plus except for The Incredible Hulk, Captain Marvel, Spider-Man Homecoming, and Avengers Endgame. Now, I can kind of understand why Captain Marvel and Endgame isn't going to be there yet because it's not on any streaming as of right now. So I'm sure once it goes to like Netflix or whatever, we'll probably have it on there. But I was most interested in Spider-Man Homecoming because that's already been on Netflix and other streaming services. So I wonder if we're not going to be able to get it because of the Sony deal going wrong. I don't know. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see on that
We'll
one.
have to get a additional streaming service from Sony.
Yeah.
You know. Of course.
That's probably exactly what will happen. All right, and we have some Comic-Con news. New York Comic-Con is right around the corner, and IDW has scored John Byrne to sign for them. He generally doesn't do conventions, so it's interesting to see IDW picking it up. I don't know. Go ahead.
What has Byrne done for IDW?
That's why I think it's kind of interesting. I don't know.
Maybe
Well,
it's got to be some new project he's picked up.
Maybe they're going to announce a project.
Yeah, that'd be my assumption.
Yeah, I think so.
He's
Which,
effectively
that's
burned all of his bridges with the big two. So the
Oh,
small
he's
joints like
insane.
IW are all he has going for him right now. Yeah, that's right. I said burned his bridges.
Well played.
No,
Well played.
I mean, he's definitely like somehow against all odds, Liefeld has better day-to-day, you know,
Anything?
establishment than Byrne has, and Byrne has been actively trying to get projects off the ground, which means nobody wants to work with him.
That's what happens when you're
Liefeld on
self-centered
the
douche. I mean, I'm sorry. I know he had his
Yeah.
day, but he's effectively proven himself very difficult to work with. That's all ego. And, he doesn't have much of a career anymore and dwells in the past and writes weird X-Men fanfic where, I don't know, we changed Dark Phoenix or some shit like that. And it's just kind of sad to me because this guy used to be one of the biggest names in comics. I mean, period. He was
His
Mr.
Superman run is like the Superman run.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and his FF run, of course, his X-Men stuff. Hell, I'll even give it up for his Iron Fist stuff in the 70s if you want to get down to it. But he just gradually thought that he was bigger than the properties and the companies he was working for. And I mean, nobody wants to work with somebody like that who's constantly feuding with editorial about everything. It is what it is, unfortunately. So, and he lost his toes now.
Of course. You can always, there's a ton more news, but you can always go to www.comic-watch.com.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else have any news nuggets?
Marvel has released a press release today that they're bringing some more Robert E. Howard characters into the Marvel Universe, including Solomon Kane, which is pretty cool.
That's cool. I was also going to mention that DC announced Suicide Squad is coming back in December as written by Tom Taylor. We are big fans of Tom Taylor on this
Cavaliers on the team. I'm so excited.
That is awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I spotted him because Bruno Redondo's doing the art, and he showed a splash page or a cover or something. And I saw Cavalier. He wears like a pirate suit ish, and I spotted the vest, like he wears like a vest with buttons on it and stuff, and he has a sword. I spotted the vest and a sword, and I said, "Is that Cavalier in the background?" And he confirmed that yes, Cavalier is in the series.
Well, he'll die first.
Probably. I don't know. There's some real no names on there. They got Thylacine on there. They got Wink on there. Like,
hey, that's the way the Suicide Squad is supposed to be built.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, if there's nothing else, I think let's dive into our reviews for the week. First up from Marvel, we have King Thor, number 1 of 4, written by Jason Aaron, art by Esad Ribic and Eve Svorchina. King Thor number 1 is the grand finale of Jason Aaron's historic 7-year run on the Son of Odin. It's the end. It's the end times. It's Thor versus Loki for all the marbles as the universe is dying. I don't want to get too much into it because I know John Jack has a lot to say about it. So, John, take it from here.
Hey, so King Thor takes place millions of years in the future after basically everything has died besides a few familiar immortal faces and the resurrected human race living on New Midgard, who last time we saw them were recovering from an attack by a magic emboldened Dr. Doom who fought Thor for decades until Thor eventually managed to kill him. King Thor picks up right after where we left off at the end of Thor 16 / the end of War of the Realms, with King Thor going back and Loki defeating Ego, the living planet, or the Necro world, because Ego had been infected. Basically, the chain of custody goes like this. All Black the Necro Sword started out with Null, God of the Symbiotes, as revealed in Venom #4. And when Null was defeated by Thor, I think Null was defeated by Thor. So Null was defeated by Thor and fell to the world of Gore the God Butcher. Gore the God Butcher set out to kill all gods. Over the course of millions of years, he nearly succeeded, only to be and employing a face we see in this book to make the mother of all bombs, the God Bomb, that would destroy all gods in all timelines at all, basically all gods. That was foiled 7 years ago by the three Thors uniting together, just like they did at the end of War of the Realms. So after Gore was defeated, the Necro Sword fell to Earth and was captured by, or was held by King Thor for a short time until Galactus came to devour the last planet in the cosmos, which was, of course, New Midgard. So Thor was able to repel Galactus using All Black the Necro Sword and Mjolnir, but in so doing ended up passing All Black the Necro Sword to Galactus, who set out for easier prey, in this case, Ego the Living Planet. Again, a battle ensued. Ego the Living Planet and Galactus fought for however long, and Ego eventually won, becoming Ego the Necro World. The Necro World being, of course, infused with All Black the Necro Sword. As Ego the Necro World celebrated his victory, a worm crawled up from on his surface and began to taunt him. Ego, being, emboldened by the Necro Sword and, just being kind of his name is Ego. His name is literally Ego. Couldn't take the taunting and started destroying small pieces of himself to try and kill the worm, which would cause the worm to burrow and come out a different place, and he'd destroy that piece of himself. Eventually, the worm had messed with him to the point that Ego effectively had put himself past the point of being able to fix himself. As Ego died, it was revealed the worm was Loki. That was at the start of the Fresh Start Thor series last year. And ever since then, Loki has been traveling, empowered with the Necro Sword, just plotting and scheming to eventually take down Thor. It is a little bit disappointing that that years of character development have been cast aside for a really archetypal Loki. Just jealous and angry and stuff. This isn't the Loki that's in the books right now. This isn't the Loki that we've seen in the last few years. This is like classic, Kirby Lee era style Loki, emboldened with the Necro Sword. And Thor does make a really great point in this book that Gore was a mortal holding the Necro Sword, and he attained abilities to rival Thor. So where does that put Loki, who's already, a base ass guardian is class 30 strength? Like they're pretty dang strong just off the baseline, and Loki's higher than that. So like giving him the Necro Sword is, it's like giving a shark a submachine gun. But so they fight. Thor hucks him into a sun. He eats the sun, which normally fire and light are things the Necro Sword can be damaged by, which again shows us that it's been pretty amped up. I also wanted to point out that Omnipotent City is I was correct when we were talking about No Road Home. Omnipotent City is destroyed, so it was bullcrap that it was in No Road Home. I was right. But all in all, this was a pretty good issue. I wish that it had dealt with more than just stuff directly spinning out of the God Butcher. Because like if you read the first trade of Aaron's Thor run, you would have a pretty good idea. Like that's all you need to read to go into this actually. But it might develop more over time. But I thought it was really good for the most part. The art was stellar. Rebic is so dang good. And one last outing with Shadrach the Mad, the god of nothing, the god of bombs. I love Shadrach. Yeah, just it's a great book. If you like Thor, read it. I did not find it very new reader friendly. So a person who hasn't read any of this stuff might be a bit confused. And that too bad. Sorry. Yeah, Aaron's run will, by the end of this, be 123 issues long, which makes it 3 times as long as Simonson's run and approximately twice as long as Lee and Kirby's run. So it's a dang impressive feat that he's pulled off these last 7 years. And I'm really interested to see what he does next. Who is next? I'm sorry, I didn't. Nick.
Yeah, definitely. So when we said we were reading this book, I did some research into it. I just dived into Jason Aaron's run. It's interesting that John pointed out that you really only need to read volume 1 because that's about how far I've gotten into it. And I felt caught up, so that was interesting. When you get the book, they have it marketed that it's the conclusion to his run, so you don't expect it to be very new reader friendly. They approached it in a way that at least feels like you can jump into it and somewhat know what's going on. So where John was disappointed that they hit typical or classic tropes for these characters, that was also a way that felt more welcoming for new readers, that they understood the motives of these characters and what was going on. So it was definitely an interesting perspective. But ultimately, when I got the book, I thought it was just an old man Thor book. And that's kind of what I ended up getting out of it too. It was, the old man or old woman trope that Harley even hit, that is super popular these days. I expected something similar to that approach out of this run because it looks like it, to be honest, and they delivered something that exceeded my expectations, so I ended up enjoying it. But it does rely heavily on all of the lore that you just listened to John explain pretty in depth. It uses that and more. So there are parts that you can feel like you're left out a bit on the development that has occurred that you feel like needs to happen in this book. But ultimately, they play on some pretty great character dynamics between Thor and Loki. I like that they brought that duality back between the feuding brothers and the ending of them talking about the death of Odin and then Loki's mother's death, how they use that to impact one another in the fight and they use it against each other. I thought that was great and just took it right back to like the eternal struggle they've almost had of fighting with each other in these family dynamics. So I thought they played with those notions pretty well, but there's so much happening and it's so in depth and so caught up in itself and its lore that you feel like it's almost a chore to get through and that there's a lot behind it, so it's very weighty and it reads like that, but the art stellar. It's just composed brilliantly, so it's hard to find complaints there. But if you're not pretty caught up on Jason Aaron's run, you might not enjoy this as much as other people. B, what do you think?
Look, we have another Thor and a Loki going at it again story. Thor yells and says, "Loki, what have you done, you monster?" I feel like I've heard that line and I don't even read Thor. I did like Shadrach, the god of bombs. He was cool. So we have Loki and Thor going at it again. So who wins the battle, you ask? Either one. It's the god of butchers. Yeah, okay. The one cool thing I did like about the art was the marker effects on the black colors in the background and the clothes. That was really cool. I enjoyed that part. knowing that it's Aaron's conclusion to his long Thor run, I'm sure that it does some fan service, which is great or cool because I mean that's his fan base who's reading it. But it's not enough for me to want to continue reading it, I guess. But I'm also not a big Thor fan, and I read, I think, 1 or 2 volumes of Thor when Aaron first started it, and it just didn't catch me. Like nothing grabbed me. But that was it. It was cool.
So I really loved it. I've been reading Jason Aaron's run since it began, and I was just thinking about it. I've been reading Thor consistently since the Straczynski run started in 2006. So my Thor fandom is pretty well trod, and I've picked up quite a bit of back issues since then. So Thor's kind of my guy. Not as much as John. I don't want to step on your toes, buddy. But there's a lot that's gone into Jason Aaron's run. And for it to have been as consistent as it's been with as few bumps in the road for 7 years is very, very remarkable. You just don't see writers on books for this long anymore, let alone with the level of consistency that he's brought to the game. So, I mean, that in and of itself should be very, very highly applauded. The fact that in the end we've come full circle and we're back to where we started with the original God Butcher story, which is fantastic. If you haven't read it, it's every bit as good as Simonson's Thor or Lee and Kirby. I mean, it's a high watermark for the Thor character, bar none. But the questions in it are, and these questions pervade the entirety of Aaron's run, are, who's to say what makes a god worthy? Who's to say that they're worth adulation and worship? And that's been the beating heart of Jason Aaron's Thor run. And we kind of got some closure on it in modern times with the epilogue of War of the Realms. There's some closure on that, and Thor basically saying, I'm going to fight to be worthy, but I'm not by any means going to insist that I'm worthy, or something to that effect. JJ can correct me if I got that wrong, but but now we're truly at the end, not just the end of the run, but the end of all things, the end of reality in the multiverse. And here's Gore back again to bring a full symmetrical sense of symmetry to this run and this series, and to answer once and for all, who are you to call yourself a god when you can die just as easily as anyone else? And to me, that's expert writing. That's well thought out. It's been plotted and planned. It's clearly, he's been setting the seeds for this story for years now. This stuff with the sword and Galactus and Ego and its gradual making its way over to Loki just didn't happen overnight. He's been planting these storytelling seeds for a minute. And that's impressive. Absolutely impressive. So, I actually did feel that this managed to be relatively new reader friendly. And I think it worked in its favor that you saw Loki and Thor in some senses reverting to more recognizable tropes, or not tropes necessarily, but versions of themselves, because that strikes to a more complex, brotherly, lost the word. Archetype. Sorry. And that right there, that archetype, it's just pervasive throughout Western culture, going back, centuries and centuries, because it's so strong. Thor versus Loki. Yeah, of course we've seen it before, but we've seen it before because it's evergreen. And I just absolutely loved this, and I could probably ramble on about things that I loved even more than what I've already gone into. Esad Ribic's art was absolutely fantastic as usual, and I don't think you need to be a longtime Thor fan to pick this up and really enjoy it, because it is expertly written in such a way that I just think anyone could really jump in and enjoy this, if not for nothing else on a superficial level. So that's my 2 cents. Does anyone else have anything else to say about King Thor?
I do agree that what you guys are saying with being able to jump in, it is mood friendly. Like, I didn't feel lost at all. So
Very cool. Well, all right. If nobody else has anything else, let's move on to our next book. It is Gotham City Monsters, number 1 of 6 from DC Comics, written by Steve Orlando, art by Emin K. Nahuelpan and Trish Mulvihill. And I'm sure I butchered the first artist's name. I apologize. It tells the story of a loose band of monsters getting together in Monster Town, in which I'd frankly forgotten was a thing, in the heart of Gotham City, and wackiness ensues. So, Nick, why don't you start us off with this one? What'd you think about it?
Absolutely, I loved it. So I had mentioned earlier in our chat that September had rolled around, which is basically Halloween, and that means stories like this are bound to happen. And I was super excited when we chose to read it finally, because it has a character that I already love, Frankenstein, and I've kind of been curious about what's been going on with Leviathan happening. We find out, Shade's been taken down, and now he's out doing his own thing, and he's determined to do something different. And I think we come into these group of characters that are awesome for this time, but also work well together. So it was interesting to see writer Orlando pull off something like this. I know we had mentioned that he touched on a couple of events pretty well, but it was also, you don't feel like it's burdened by anything like that. You can jump right into this, and it's just super fun storytelling, and it's great art. I mean, it's nothing that is going to just draw you immediately to it like it's the best art on the shelves, but it's consistent, it's solid, and I appreciate that. The story feels very much on par with that approach. It's going to be consistent probably all throughout. It already feels structured correctly, and the pacing is right. These characters are feeling like they're going to mesh pretty well, and the story is interesting. So I'm very much on board for this. It's a little bit lighthearted for the action horror that I'm normally into, but it also hits some pretty great moments. Frankenstein has some pretty great moments of him shooting people and getting violent and stuff like that. So maybe not even people, but I believe it was Mandrill that met the fate of that one. But I thought it was one of those books that you don't expect to love as much in the pile of books that you're reading. It stands out. It finds a way to stand out amongst a crowded shelf. And I thought that was super cool, and ultimately what I'm here for in books. And it doesn't feel like anything DC is doing right now. So I thought they found a nice approach to it to feel fresh and something interesting. And I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm definitely on board. John, what do you think?
I thought this book was just really good, like really solidly written. I thought the art was great. You got into some character. Orlando's really good at dipping into characters you don't see very often, and kind of sometimes he writes them less on point. But in this case, I thought the characters were really well covered and really interestingly written. I liked seeing Croc out of this. He did a great job of placing this within continuity when he had a chance to make it be, or he could have very easily had this be an out of continuity book like he did with The Unexpected. Or, well, I don't know if it was out of continuity, but it certainly doesn't matter to continuity. Out of continuity would be Martian Manhunter. But so it's really well done in the way that he ties it into the end in one book. He ties it into the end of Suicide Squad, he ties it into Leviathan pretty heavily. He ties it into You're the Villain with its setting, or with City of Bane, and then. So I thought it was just really well done. He even references Night of the Monster Men, which was a not fantastic crossover early on in Rebirth, but
no, they had Gundams and fought big monsters.
Yeah, it wasn't without its charm. I'm just not.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, you're good. But I thought it was just pretty impressive that he managed to tie it so thoroughly into this is in continuity. This is part of the. It feels like it's part of the world, you know, without feeling like it's trying to bend the knee to Bendis or King or who was writing Suicide Squad at the end. It just doesn't matter.
Bobby Thompson?
No, it was.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I'm sorry. But you know, and I wonder if Croc's going to be on the upcoming Suicide Squad, and if this might tie into that. That might be interesting too. I thought it was cool the way they had Croc was trying to get a fresh start, and it was totally like a ex-con getting out of prison, feeling like it had that feel, you know, like I'm not trying to get up to no trouble. I'm just trying to get a job and get my life going, which I thought was brilliant. Likewise, I thought interesting that iVampire found a vampire he couldn't kill. Frankenstein's fighting not the Anti-Men. Although Marvel had a Mandrill too, so that's kind of weird. I have several of his appearances because I collect ape covers, but the Marvel one. So I thought it was really well put together. They did a great job, or he did a great job having a organic feeling antagonist to the story as well. It's not just some random villain that has no tie to any of them, or it's it's someone that some of them have passed with. Just interesting stuff. I don't think it's like the best book DC's putting out right now, because that is Freedom Fighters, but it's pretty high up there. I mean, DC is not necessarily firing on all its cylinders right now, not to throw any shade at any one book, but this one definitely, if Orlando can stick this feeling and this tone that he's hit in this first issue, I think he's got a really solid book. And I'm not even the biggest Orlando fan, so it's really cool to see, you know. What did you think of it, B?
So Vampire or iVampire, never heard of him, but it's cool because he ripped somebody's heart out. So that was a thing. Then we get Frankenstein, which is cool. I mean, who doesn't like Frankenstein? I like Frankenstein. I have his tattoo. Then Frankenstein cuts iVampire in half. That's also a thing. Honestly, I have no idea what happened in this book and who is who. It was violent. I felt like it gave no F's in the book. It's cool. I liked it. Not sure if it was enough to get me to read number 2, maybe, but I don't know. It was a cool book. I liked it, but I didn't have too much to say on it other than cool.
I love how you basically excoriated the book. You're like, I don't know, maybe I'll read number 2. So, Gotham City Monsters #1 from Steve Orlando. I was pleasantly surprised by this book. When I first heard it announced, my first thought was, oh, okay, monsters running around in a pack. Whatever. This series will be forgotten, 30 minutes after the last issue is released. But it was a lot of fun. And I was really surprised by that. I kind of feel like with its mismatched kind of long forgotten characters in some cases, that this is maybe what Orlando was trying to do with the unexpected. And just didn't get the chance because the book was unfortunately canceled at 8 issues, and he didn't really get a chance to establish anything, or much of anything, rather. But yeah, this book has a really fun vibe, and I was pleasantly surprised by the number of times that it called back to Grant Morrison's Seven Soldiers of Victory, both with Frankenstein and Melmotte, who was the villain. He was the villain in one of the books. I can't remember which. Anyway, he's from that story. I also liked the fact that the Red Monk was in the story, who, for those of you who don't know, was Batman's first supernatural foe way, way back in the Golden Age, around about 1939.
Yeah, that was a cool cameo. That is a cool
great cameo. And it was done in a way that it's just kind of there. So it's not shoving it in your face like, it's just there for you to get if you get it. But yeah, the stuff.
They didn't have him kidnap Julie Madison for old time's sake.
Damn you!
No Batman cameo was required.
No purple glove Batman who's snapping necks running around. Nope, none of that. But I do love that it did touch on all these other stories like Night of the Monster Men and City of Bane and Event Leviathan without necessarily being hindered by them in any way, shape, or form. So that was really cool. This was a fun, surprisingly good little story. I love the kind of blue-collar take on Killer Croc. I think that was my favorite thing out of the whole thing, and I really hope that angle gets pursued because I think there's a lot of story potential there. But the art was really good. Not great, but it fit the story, and I'm kind of excited to see where this goes. Anyone else have any other thoughts on it, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. You had mentioned how it tied into a previous Grant Morrison run. Does that have any impact on the villain that we saw?
No, not the Morrison run on Batman. The Seven Soldiers of Victory.
Yeah, definitely. That villain that we saw. Do you have any insight into where he came about and how he plays into the history of these characters? Because that was one of the things
he's
I was
kind of a big. I mean, it's been a little while since I've read it, so forgive me for being oblique on the details. He's kind of a stereotypical sorcery, magical, mystical douchebag villain. Wants all the power. Kind of bad. Clarion. That was the series he was in. Clarion the Witch Boy. Which was one of the weirder of the Seven Soldiers series, and that's saying something, because there was some very Grant Morrison-y stuff going on there. And yeah, that's actually where this iteration of Frankenstein came from, was that. So I enjoyed that because I like that Frankenstein. He's kind of a Hellboy ripoff, but he's still cool. He's still Frankenstein. He still has a big giant sword.
Because at the end, whenever he appears, I think he mentions my lord. And I thought that was a pretty heavy couple of words to mention whenever that villain first appears. And I thought there's definitely story back behind that. But I didn't have it, so it was lost on me at the time.
I'm pretty sure Melmotte was kind of like a secondary villain in the grand scheme of Seven Soldiers. I want to say he was ultimately a minion or something of the main villain. Something like that. So, nice. Yeah, I like connective tissue like that. It just proves that other people remember these things than me. If nothing else.
They still count.
We're not the only ones reading these comics.
Damn right. So, hey, anyone else have anything more on Gotham City Monsters? Well, let's close it out with our final segment. What have you been reading and what are you looking forward to? B, what you got?
I read Black Widow, which was amazing, but maybe that's just because her last run was so bad. It made it look awesome, but it was actually really fun.
Was this the newer Black Widow series?
Yeah, Web of
Black Widow. It just started?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Okay.
yep. I read that one. And I read a little bit more of X Factor. There's some drama. Jean knows about Maddie now, and Scott is walking around like a lost dog. I also read Alpha Flight, the last one. It was pretty cool. Some crazy things are happening in there. I thought it was a one shot, but I think it tends to seem like it's going to lead into more. I don't know. Do you guys know anything about it?
I don't think anything official has been announced, but since Ed Brisson is A, popular, and B, Canadian, that leads me to believe that there's probably going to be a new Alpha Flight series early next year with him writing it. That
Okay.
educated guess.
All right. I did read Something is Killing the Children. It was okay, but I think there was so much hype behind it and so many press releases that I kind of was expecting so much more. So I think if you go in just like with no expectations, I think you're going to come off and be like, oh, this is a pretty good book, you know. But for me, because I had such high expectations, I felt let down a little bit. It was more kind of the art. It's a unique art, and it was cool, but it didn't grab me like I was hoping it would. But it's still worth a shot. Go check it out. I did read Fantastic Four. They're going back to their first mission. Um, what made them Fantastic Four? So I know
More
this.
fan service and a run full of fan service.
Uh-huh.
Leave
And
it alone.
I like it. I like that they're revisiting it. But I don't know where it's gonna go. Like obviously it's gonna go bad.
And you read a lot this week.
My
Good
money,
for you.
my money is on they get hit by cosmic rays and their powers switch.
See,
That's mine.
or I was actually thinking, or it goes away.
Yeah, or their powers go away. That's the one too.
Yeah,
I just want to see Sue become the Thing. Show her
that would be interesting for sure.
that uppity. She's so vain. It would destroy her.
We've had a she thing before.
Yeah.
No, I know, but specifically Sue.
Ah.
So what am I looking forward to? Probably Batman, although I haven't read the last issue. And maybe Xena. I don't know. I'm not caught up, but I really want to catch up, and that making you say that I'm going to read it will make me catch up. But that's it for me. What about you, JJ?
For what I've been reading, I actually just finished, like, moments before we came on, Conan Road of Kings, which is a miniseries written by Roy Thomas and with art by Mike Henderson, who's actually currently drawing Superior Spider-Man. Road of Kings is a direct sequel to Iron Shadows on the Moon, which is my second favorite Conan story, an original Robert E. Howard story. Roy Thomas wrote the Bronze Age version, which was in Savage Sword of Conan number 12, and then Tim Truman and Tomas Giorello did the Dark Horse version, which was at the tail end of Conan the Adventurer, maybe, possibly Conan the Cimmerian. Conan the Cimmerian, I think it was, the tail end of Conan the Cimmerian, which is a 24-issue series from 2012. It's actually a really good story, Iron Shadows on the Moon. The Dark Horse series, I'm on the 4th omnibus now. The Dark Horse series in general do a really great job of organically traveling through these classic Conan stories and then placing connective arcs between them that make it so there's like a direct bridge from one story to the next, whereas the original stories weren't directly connected. So it's really good in that regard. And so it's exciting stuff, and getting a sequel to a book that I've read 100 times was pretty cool also. A good sequel. But as for what I'm looking forward to, probably more King Thor. I haven't read Loki yet. Loki's been really good. Punisher Kill Crew was fantastic also, the second one. There was a shark bot. He said, let's go kill the shark bot. That's the best thing I've ever heard Punisher say. So, more Punisher Kill Crew. Definitely not Year of the Villain or City of Pain or even Event Leviathan at this point. Although this week's Event Leviathan was the most eventful of the 4 so far, in that literally one thing happened. That's all I got to say about that. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. So it's definitely been a busy week, but I was able to read Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy #1. It was I should have suggested it to do on the show, but I know I wouldn't have gotten much support on that one. But these characters have a chemistry that works really well, and that's why they have such a huge fan base. So I got the book and I thought it might be fan service. It might just totally be fan service. But Jody Hauser, I believe, wrote this one, just really did something cool with it and tied into what's been happening excuse me, with the Heroes in Crisis, where we found Poison Ivy at the end of that. And that was a super debated run. Even Comic-Watch, if you can find the reviews at comic-watch.com, you'll see how controversial it is. But this series...
I think number 8 is my second lowest review ever.
It definitely hit some records for low reviews, but they were well reasoned. But this book picks up on those events and spins it in a way that you can get on board with. So these characters feel like they're a natural fit. I mean, it's just you're kind of on board for whatever they have going on in their lives. And it's super interesting and it's tons of fun. So I was glad to see that it actually worked out and it wasn't just total fan service. Harley Quinn's a character that definitely DC is pushing. She's got so many different series going on that are always coming and going with different minis alongside her ongoing. It's a lot to keep up with if you're a fan of Harley. So it was cool to see this one stand out as something other than just fan service for the fans of Harley. But there are also some things happening over at Dynamite Comics that I'm pretty excited about. And in my looking forward to, we have the final issue of Red Sonja, Birth of the She-Devil. That is basically somewhat about her origins and the birth of the Red Sonja that we all kind of know and love, which is very opposite from what we see in Mark Russell's ongoing Red Sonja. It was cool to see.
Bad.
And Birth of the She-Devil was the better of the two while they were going on, but it has gotten a bit worse as it reaches its end. I'm hoping the 4th issue kind of picks things back up and ends on a high note. But
I have one issue of Red Sonja. You know why?
Oh no.
Chimpanzees on the cover.
I'm not surprised by that.
Like they're doing really cool things, so these characters are definitely a part of what Dynamite is doing right now. They just came out with Vampirella Red Sonja #1. And that one turned out to be a bit more fan service, unlike Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. It was interesting to see these team ups together because one was done really well and fit within the story that was happening, and one felt like it was having a harder time bringing these two together. I didn't expect Vampirella and Red Sonja to just naturally fall together and have this awesome chemistry. So they are introducing it in a slower way, but they're doing cool things with these characters. So we have the last Birth of the She-Devil coming up, and we also have Vampirella #3 happening. And I was a little still leery on the first issue, and then the second issue happened of Vampirella, and it was wild. It was killer nuns and werewolves and tons of blood, and that's what I was here for. So I'm really hoping that the third issue gives me more of that, and maybe it'll... I was very hesitant coming into before issue 1 happened because of Priest's, I guess, rhetoric, as he discussed his approach to this series. But it turns out he seems to have a pretty cool story to tell. And it's not something that you take super serious. It's not something that you're going to find a lot of depth and complexity in, but it's badass fun. So I'm here for it. Matt, what about you?
So I uncovered Adam Strange miniseries from 0405 that was written by Andy Diggle with art by Pascal Ferry that is just awesome.
Yeah.
And I've kind of, I'd never known about this series before. It actually turns out to be a backdoor setup for Rand Thanagar War, which was in and of itself one of the several miniseries that set up Infinite Crisis. So right from the start, it appears that Rand's star has gone supernova while Adam Strange was on Earth, and therefore, his entire family, the entire Randian culture was destroyed. Well, he doesn't believe it, and only he doesn't believe it. Even Superman is like, man, this happened, dude. Sorry. And so he embarks on this quest to find out what happened to Rand. And it's just this really awesome, heartfelt story about a man determined to find his wife and kid against all odds.
Were they
And
on
that
that space? Were they on that space station from the end of the 1990 series?
No. I don't know what you're talking about.
You read that?
Oh, the one from the early 90s, the Richard Brunning series with the Kubert art?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in 90, not the late 90s.
I said
okay,
90.
You confused me for a second. Sorry, okay, my mistake. But anyway, yeah, it's a really great series. I felt like it lost just a little bit of focus at the end because it introduced both the Omega Men and the Vrildox Legion, a version of the Legion. And it kind of got a little bit away from its focus on, what I fell in love with, but it's still really good. A solid 8 out of 10 series, I thought. What I'm looking forward to, it's funny you should mention Fallout from Heroes in Crisis, Nick, because I'm mostly looking forward to Flash Forward by Scott Lobdell and Brett Booth, because this is purportedly going to be the miniseries that at least starts to right the ship where Wally West is concerned, who was absolutely character assassinated in Heroes in Crisis. And I don't want to go for another half hour bitching about this, but this is something that needs to happen quickly. And I feel like this series is put together because somebody at DC Editorial realized that fact. So, Flash Forward, fingers crossed, the salvation of Wally West. And, nothing more that I could be possibly further looking forward to next week than that. So, guys, any final thoughts before we close it out? Hey, we kept it under an hour. I'm pretty proud of us. Hey, so this has been episode number 47 of the Comic Watchers Show. Comic Watchers Show is part of comic-watch.com, your home for fan news and reviews written by fans for fans. I'm your host, Matt Meyer. This is Brian Arbizo, John Jack, and Nicholas Osborne, and we shall return next week. Brian.
P.S. We changed our slogan. Bye.